from you, Sovereign, if you feel willing, maybe just to explore what does it take for us to be sovereign in the world?
Well, there's not a piece of paper that you can get that's going to be signed by anybody other than yourself. But why would you want to write something down on a piece of paper to tell yourself that you're sovereign? So it's we're born like that. It's just that I discovered that for myself, it didn't really end up feeling like that, and nobody actually informed me that that was something that was relevant, and that then, and this is this whole course in Syntropy, that in order to understand, for me, the how did we get here, um, it's very relevant to comprehend cult programming and how we do that to ourselves and how we continue to do that. And a nice way to witness what we are doing, we're culturing. It's just what happens in life. You have yogurt cultures, and you have fermentation cultures, and so we're culturing um, a it's all just the original blueprint of being a human being connected with earth, nature, sky, spirit, and then each other. And our westernized societal framework is just so distorted. It's so sick. It's so diseased. So a way to so we have this system, because that's another thing. It's like, okay, well, that's great that we all want to be indigenously living on the land, or if that's a fantasy that you may entertain. But how does that work when we got this kind of abrasive system set up in such a way to really test your will strength in accomplishing that? And then it seems to be at every corner still some sort of compromise, because I don't there's a lot that I don't find pretty in the place where I spent 10 years, and benefit finding resolve with that. But I just don't get excited when I walk into a servo. It's like one of these petrol stations, and I look at what's on offer on the shelves, and it's like, well, that's your that's the kind of predominant culture is there on display. And that's not a health culture necessarily, and that's so good because we have freedom of choice. So it's then again an opportunity to just go there to just pay for the fuel. But I see that the systems that we've created are set up and orchestrated in such a way, tying back to the small families. And how do we untangle ourselves from that is the main question. And I would say start within. And then there is a process by which you can bolster your own awareness of your own sovereignty by going and telling all the banks to go and fuck off. Bob's definitely got some really nice experience in navigating that ecosystem that is rather parasitic and entropic. And really, what it is, there's not full closure given. I don't like to use the word disclosure, but that's what it. There's no full closure given on all the clauses, so you kind of have to educate yourself. But then you just went through, the schooling system and got educated, so you haven't been programmed and trained in order to actually think critically as part of a larger sort of orientation. And so that's all training to learn how to think for ourselves, to really get into the essence of becoming our own leader, and what that looks like, what that feels like. And then, because what I've witnessed and a lot of my friends, so this is about, the best way to I call it is that and this is a reference to a really awesome um, a series of cartoons, even adult cartoons. But we are living in a simulation within a simulation within a simulation within a simulation. And so I noticed that there are layers of this kind of bubble, and I want to have a happy Fruity land. But I noticed that there were glass walls that I could pierce, but they are in circumference all around. So there, it's not like, oh, you go through one way. You're gonna the whole world becomes bigger. And what I found is that when you're at a certain level of awareness, or when I was at a certain level of awareness, and my friends were starting the sovereignty movement, in there was so much trauma underpinning there, so much unresolved trauma that wasn't being addressed in the process. And so they were creating solutions and resolutions based on the past imprinting and hurt and anger and frustration towards now the boogeyman wasn't the bully at school. It wasn't the lack of the father that offered the protection. It just became the government. And I've really learned through Syntropy to question the function. And I also have learned that by trying to change the external world, you can forget about really modifying anything in the internal landscape, because there's just a whole bunch of little children, for those that are new to that, that fragmented off. They disassociated through all the harshness and through all the non-love and through all the experiences that weren't meeting us in our nature. And that's what the Western culture has become, not meeting the younglings in their nature in a kind of predominant sense, if you look just at the broad strokes of schooling systems and so forth. And so I witnessed and felt I was maybe a little bit more in tune with my intuition. I looked at the guys wanting to avoid paying their tickets and getting a manual from a guy and how to do that. And it was all like very head heavy. And I felt in reflection, I realized that if I don't have the foundations of what human nature is about, from a not like I'm a sovereign man, no, 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 no. It's like, what does that mean? Sovereignty means like I'm at peace. I'm in a happy state. And it doesn't have to be like that all the time. But I'm at peace and I'm free, and therefore I can be at peace. What does it mean? What does it mean to be free? What does it mean to be at peace? These are two very simple words. Everybody likes to throw particularly freedom around. What does it really mean, like on a human level? And for me, freedom means that I'm not preoccupied in my thoughts with other or with a third party. Because when the thoughts are performing a function with purpose, and I don't have to shame my thoughts or da 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 da, then, and I recognize a pattern of obsession, preoccupation, pre-thinking, judgment that keeps coming back, then I can question, like, wow, do I want to do it like that? Because freedom ultimately is a choice. It's, for me, it's a state of mind, which once that mind becomes more free, then the feelings of freedom become more available to me. And I fall in and out of that because I'm preoccupied with, the president of this country and what that joker clown is all, doing, being puppeteered. And I go into that for a while, and then I remind myself, so like, wow, he's no different than any of the other cats. So what's the real story here? And can you find that within? And so I'm going within because of the external, much more than not. And that's where I found sovereignty to be really able to be found, is that it's not out there. You can't go there. You can't, it doesn't matter how many mountains you climb. You can definitely feel better about yourself. But I see a lot of people adding on new stuff, new information, new layers. And adding on new layers is not, is like not peeling away the kind of crappy layers that are covering up the gems and the preciousness and the self-knowing and the peacefulness and the calm and the joy and the that is actually already within. And so I've decided that before I go and, write to the fantasy queen of the fantasy country called the Netherlands, that I'm going to be fantasy unsubscribing from her fantasy. And I'm my own human being. I looked at the Dutch process. Um, I feel that I have more to do within in order to have that just be a very natural progression. And I feel that that's something very personal for everybody, because since everything is performing a function with purpose, that can only be for you as an individual, for me as an individual. It can be a purpose for a collective. Like, what's the purpose of the whole scandemic? Well, that's the purpose can be to awaken us all, but I can only apply that on myself. And so that's where I kind of have felt a little bit kind of disenchanted and disempowered, because I just have to bring it back to self all the time. And I can only change my world, and then the world out there can change. It's like, oh, well, really? That sounds like a big job. But when I listen to that voice, again, that's where I can find a little boy. And so for me, a lot of this work of making use of the external world has been a return to sovereignty. So sovereignty is already what I am. I can't reclaim it, but what I can do is I can let go, or I can dissolve any of the belief systems and patterns and that actually keep me from simply being that and feeling that. And for me, that's been just a whole bunch of interpersonal relating with my inner boys and even some girls, and reintegrating them. And that has been the natural return to sovereignty. So how I've put it is that my sovereignty reclaimed all of me, all that I thought that I had become, all the identity layers, all the names that I gave myself. Like, the name Sovereign is about to die here in this fruity land and ecosystem. And I know it's happening because I chose that sound for myself, because I wanted an active reminder of who I am. But slowly but surely, a kind of like identity cultured around that. I built a little website, and I built a little podcast, and it's all very sexy. But I am under instructions of my grandmothers, and I know what they told me. And it's something that can be keeping me from actually entering into the deeper states of connectivity with all of me. And so that's been my process, is to have sovereignty reclaim all of me, all of my identities, all of my stories, and most of them were not true. Most of them were just a bunch of rubbish and a bunch of illegitimate, illogical, fruity land belief systems just to stay safe. And in the process of my sovereignty reclaiming me and my freedom reclaiming me, I just returned to that more than anything. And that's an ongoing activity. But in this whole process, what I found is that in the dissolving and the resolving and the coming home to self, coming home to freedom, coming home to love, the only things that sat in the way of that was everything that was either done to me or done around me or that I experienced that didn't feel nice. And so that then leads into this feeling based relating human nature. How do we do that? Because at the essence of all this conversation, disassociation in our human biological, psychological ecosystem makeup is just so real. It happens. I personally believe, and that's my belief, that it happens for everybody. If you're not met with love, our physiological biometric has a system in place that if we can't process an emotionally intense situation in a moment, and instead of going into the process of freeze and just staying in that, and then just staying in that for the rest of our lives, that doesn't work for the rest of our body. So our body is, all right, we can't process this now. Whoop, and it just puts it in a nice little bubble, and it's a memory imprint with feelings and story, and it's very rich, but it's just put away so that we can keep navigating. And when that physiological biometrical process is understood, then I became very clear that all that I really have to do is just find all these. If I want to be sovereign, that's what I need to do. I need to figure out why I'm emotionally reacting, who that is, where that comes from, where the imprint is. And that's tiring work. But when I question who is the one that's tired about that, and I have another opportunity to find another one. And it may sound a little bit weird because, I've recently also started looking into the work of, I think it's John Bradshaw, and Bob introduced to, and I got really upset listening to an hour of him. Really upset. I said, fuck, I had to figure this out all by myself because I had to be sovereign, and I was just going to do it all because, our human nature is just able to show us everything. I could have just listened to an hour and a half of that man and downloaded this book and went and done it. That probably would have been a lot better and a lot quicker. But I had my path, my unique hero's journey, and that was really great. But I see that that's at the essence is the restoration of the original innocence, the original purity, and those precious talents and gifts. They just naturally come forward if whatever got suppressed is uncovered and is given a space to speak. So that's part why I created a place to do feeling-based relating, and hopefully, without even pushing anybody into anything, people discover more about themselves. Because, as Bob says, in many different ways, in many different forms, but he's such a great anchor point in my neurochemistry. Is that if I'm not creating my life, then who is? And so I can only do that for me, and I know that you can only do that for you. But for anybody that is where they are and they do want means to unsubscribe from the system, I know that Bob has got a wealth of experience to tap into. And I just love relating with Joanne because I've been friends with her now for, I don't know, 4 years or something. And every year, once or twice a year, we catch up. And I know that she's got a tremendous gold nugget around Australian and probably also New Zealand, because it's Commonwealth language, ways to extract ourselves from obligations that are actually fraudulent. So that's me on sovereignty.